A couple of years ago, I believe you called me, said you were struggling with certain situations specific to sex addiction,
Right.
right? That it was confounding you in ways that drug addiction, alcohol addiction were not. Am I
Yeah.
remembering the conversation
I
correctly?
remember it very clearly.
Yeah. So what was going on, and is it still going on?
It's definitely still going on. You actually said something to me that I have thought about tremendously afterwards, and I've been incredibly grateful to you for, and I have actually mentioned several times to people, and it was a very simple thing, and it's probably something I should have known in my own head, but I needed to hear it from someone else, and you were saying, and I'll go deeper, but I'm saying you said, addiction to substances is about a 1-year process to get rid of. And addiction to process addictions or sex addiction is about a 5-year process. So you need to be a lot more patient. And it just gave me...
I don't know that I have I don't remember having the reference for the substance as that being 1 year, but certainly
Right.
the process.
The
yeah.
process, you said 5 years. Maybe I added the 1 year. Because I do feel... So it really gets down to that substance addiction is kind of the easiest of the addictions. That's what I mean by that is that
It is.
It's funny to say to people because like the greatest accomplishments of people is stopping substances, and I'm not knocking that, but I believe, and again, if we're looking at my model of how this works, is that if your self-esteem is really, really failing, your first attempt is going to be some form of codependency or people addiction. You're going to try to get validation from the people around you. That is the core of all addiction. How could I get these people to love me? And they mimic God. Like that, I'm going to get these people to love me, but that's exhausting. So you try other things. Maybe you try buying them to love you. So maybe it becomes sexual, and then all these things are exhausting because they're very much out of control because they're other people. They're like, you can't control them. And when you discover substances, it's like a miracle because that you could control. It's a level of control. Like, I got this. So substances, getting rid of substances, all you have to do is like get rid of the substances and never touch those substances, and that could work. But I need to figure out and manage
Having a healthy relationship.
A healthy
with
relationship with
That's
something
much
that I've turned so toxic, and is so much closer to the core of where we really are. So you find all the time with substance addicts, they take away the substances and they go, well, yeah, I'd like to go and have sex with people. Like, that's no problem. Well, I don't have that problem. That's the original problem.
Correct.
So when you get closer to the source, which is we desperately need each other's love, and you've used it in a very unhealthy way, that is incredible, incredible work to deal with. And that's,
I think it was, I sat with, I don't know if you know Divi Kamen.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she explained it in an interesting way is that our relationship, because she talks a lot about food addiction, eating disorders.
Mm-hmm.
And my experience with eating disorders, like sex addiction is tough, but eating disorders is kind of like the mother of all addictions
Right.
from my experience. It just seems so hard for people to get their arms around it. And the way she explained it was that our relationship with food starts at a really young age. So the problem often has started at, it could be at a few months old. Someone can already start developing. At about 6 months, I think the brain starts making connections between cause and effect. So a small thing is, hey, I'm feeling uncomfortable, cold, whatever it is, and then saying, hey, a little bit of food can soothe that, and then developing an unhealthy relationship with food at a young age. And then if it's modeled by parents, by the time the kid is 2 or 3, they already have a full-blown unhealthy addiction with food, using it to cope with emotional distress. And then sex comes online later on.
Right.
But you're not getting crack at 12, usually.
Right.
That's kind of happening later. So that comes online later. So she saw it as kind of the healing process as where it got interrupted, kind of the age got interrupted. I think there was someone else I spoke with who shared it more as a need, right? So if I have a need for food, a need for sex, a need for money, right? Those are actual needs that we have in the world, and then unhealthy relationships develop there. It's closer to our core than, say, alcohol, which is it does feel like a need for an addict, but it's not truly a need. You don't actually need it to. You don't actually need it to survive. regardless, I've seen people kick alcohol and drug addictions. Not easy, but I'm saying through sustained work and just not being able to make a dent in sex addiction.
I've seen the same thing. I actually had a fascinating conversation with Faith Niece about this today, which actually, like, she middle of saying, I had like this amazing aha moment. It wasn't aha. She was just telling me something I didn't know. And because I say this thing that the amount of shame that's in the two most difficult addictions, in sex and food, is so odd to me. Because those are the one thing, like, you should feel ashamed that you use drugs. Like, why are you adding something you don't need into your life? But we're ashamed of the two things that sustain us as a society. Like, that, everybody does it.
Right, that which is most primal. Yeah.
Right, but it seems like it's the most shame. And shame is like you can't really recover with enormous amount of shame. I was telling her that you walk into a room with people in recovery, and you talk about this also, but you walk into a room, and if someone's a substance addict, like, they're almost like a vegan. Like, in 10 seconds, they're going to tell you how much recovery they got. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, well, they're wearing the medallions on
right,
their
they're
neck.
like, it's the biggest pride. And you can know a sex addict for 20 years and have no idea he's a sex addict. He's not even going to tell good friends of his, or he won't tell, like, it's like the level of shame. And actually what Faith said was that because it's so primal to our society, to human beings, that we need food and sex, that any type of perversion of that, even for many generations, was immediately punished by the community. You're not allowed to run around and just have sex wherever you want. There are rules. And these are things we need to sustain us as a people.